Hey there guys, welcome to the next video here on PopCultureCrafts. So in this video I'm going to show you guys how to make a Tron baton prop, which is a prop that was used in the Tron Legacy movie, which was a Disney movie that came out a few years ago. It's a really cool prop and I think you'll have fun making it. Just a little bit of a backstory if you haven't seen the movie Tron Legacy. These were used in the movie to create all kinds of items and vehicles, like a light cycle, like a one-man aerial aircraft kind of thing, lightsabers, an umbrella in one scene. There's a whole bunch of different characters that use these for different things because they're able to create like items made out of light in the grid. So without any further ado, let's pretty much get started here on the tutorial. Now this is going to be one of the more difficult tutorials only because we have this flashlight here, which you're going to need for the basis of the Tron baton that we're going to make. Just like in all my other videos, all of the things that you're going to need are listed in the description box below, so let's head down to my workstation and start making a really cool Tron baton prop from Tron Legacy. Let's get started. Alright, so like I said before, you're definitely going to need one item to complete this tutorial, and that is an LED bar flashlight. I call them LED bar flashlights because they're pretty much just shaped like a giant bar here. This one's about 8 inches long, and you want to try to find one that's at least 8 inches long. I was able to get this one at my local Lowe's home improvement store. It's made by a company called Utilitech for about $5, and of course it included the smaller one too, which I'm going to talk about in just a second. So you definitely want to find something like this. This is about the shape it is. It's kind of like, just a rectangle, and it's got, as long as it's the basic shape of this, you will be able to use it. So like I said before, the only thing that really bothered me about just this piece was the fact that the LED part is not in the middle of the flashlight here. It's towards the top, and as you can tell with this part, it's right in the middle. So what I actually did was I was really lucky. This part, when you glue it to this part here, is exactly the same distance on each side between the LEDs, and I just had to saw a little bit off the top here. So I got really lucky, and I decided to just glue this one together once I painted the entire thing, and that becomes this flashlight right over here, this Tron baton. So like I said before, check your local home improvement stores. You can probably get them online as well, and once you get something pretty much similar to this, you can start making your Tron baton. So let's get started on the tutorial here. Alright, so I'm going to take these lanyards off. We don't need those. I'll probably use those for something else later on down the line. First thing you want to do is pop your battery compartment open here. This one actually takes 4 AAA batteries and has a small battery compartment in here. You want to definitely load up your flashlight and make sure that it works, because if it doesn't work, you're going to be taking it back to the store. So you definitely want to pop the batteries in there, and you can leave them in there for a while, and then just slide the battery cap back on. A lot of these bar flashlights work exactly the same way, and they tend to run on the same number of batteries and the same size batteries. Once again, this is 4 AAA batteries in here. This one also takes 2 AAA batteries, but I'm not actually going to use this. This is just going to be this extra piece on the top, so I'm not going to worry about that at all. So now the first thing I'm actually going to do is grab some paint, and we're going to start painting the exterior part of this, the gray and a little bit of the black, just to make it look like the Tron baton here. Alright, so for paint, I'm actually going to use acrylic paint, and if you guys haven't noticed by now, I do use a lot of acrylic paint on the channel. It's one of the easiest paints to use, and it really comes in handy. It's really cheap to buy at craft stores as well. I'm going to use just a basic black paint here for just a little bit of touch-up in case we need to do any, as well as a kind of like a battleship gray color, and that's going to be for the middle of the Tron baton here, as well as the end caps as well. So we're going to be using that battleship gray color, and that's pretty much the only 2 colors that you need, just a basic black and a battleship gray. So now let's start painting the Tron baton here. So at this point I did a little bit of measuring and tried to figure out exactly how to make it equidistant from the side here to make the black in between the same size as well as the end caps. And I decided to count up 5 lines on here. The thing is naturally it has these lines in it, which is pretty cool. Makes it kind of an easy for measuring for painting and stuff like that. So I counted up 5 of these, 1 2 3 4 5, and that's where I stopped with the gray paint. So what I'm going to do is simply take my paintbrush here, 1 2 3 4 5, and that's exactly where I'm going to stop. So I'm going to just paint this entire piece here, including the end cap on the bottom here. And as soon as I get that all the same color and it's dry, I'm going to probably apply another coat of paint to it and then start working on the middle part, which will be the LED part here. So I'm going to paint this and wait for it to dry. So once the end cap is pretty much dry, I would usually throw another coat of paint on there, but just for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to skip ahead to the part of the LEDs here. So now what we're going to do is, you're probably wondering at this point why we need black if the whole thing is black to begin with, and this is pretty much why we need it. We're going to take a little bit of black paint, And when you put your batteries in a bar LED flashlight like this and you turn it on, there's a lot of usually a lot of shine on the side here because this is one giant plastic piece. These things are insanely bright, by the way, and if you can tell when I turn this one on, there's no shining on the side here because I've covered all that with paint and everything. So that's exactly what we're going to do here. We're going to use the black paint because it's a lot darker and it'll probably only take 1 or 2 coats before it seals off all the light and you won't be able to see any of the light shining through. I did originally use the gray paint to do this because I was going to paint this whole part gray, automatically, but it took like 7 coats of gray paint and I could still see the light. So definitely try to use a darker color paint here. All we're doing here is just sealing up the sides here and going right up against that plastic piece. And it doesn't matter if you get a little bit onto this piece here because all we're really using is the middle part of this LED strip right here. So you just want to take your paintbrush and cover up all the sides with the black paint here on both sides. So once all of the black paint is pretty much dry around the LED part of the flashlight, we can put that aside and we're going to grab some more gray paint. And I'll show you my original one here just to get an idea of what exactly what you're going to do. Basically, you want both sides of the LED strip to be like pretty much equal with how much gray paint you're applying. So I usually went about about a 1/4 of an inch on each side here. This one's a little bit difficult on this side because it's kind of just a flat surface right here. This one actually has one of those bars around the side, so I can just use that as my guideline all the way around. You notice that the button for the flashlight is right here, so I kind of had to go into that a little bit because there's a little indentation for that. So what I'm going to do is, like I said, I'm going to grab some of the gray paint and I'm simply going to paint this entire piece here. I do have a little marker right down there. You really can't see it because it's so close. But you're just going to take a really tiny paintbrush and you're going to pretty much paint this entire piece right here all the way around. It's probably going to take at least 1 or 2 coats of paint just like the other pieces, but it'll definitely look really cool once you get 1 or 2 coats of paint on there. So after a little bit of painting, this is exactly what it should look like. Now remember what I said about clicking the light button and being able to tell what it looked like on the sides? Well, as you can tell, there's a decent amount of space to still fill in there, so you do have your work cut out for you. Like I said, these are insanely bright, and you really can't even tell because of my camera, but they are extremely bright flashlights, and it definitely shows on the side. You're definitely going to need a few coats of paint to make sure that that's all covered up and everything. So while we're waiting for that part to dry, and we can obviously put a few more coats on later on in the process, I'm actually going to show you how to make the hexagon part of this piece here, and this is kind of just the face plate of the Tron baton using a few pieces of paper. So let's work on that part now. So one of the coolest parts about the Tron baton is this cool, hexagon kind of control board that it has on it. I'm not sure if they actually use these in the movie. I don't think they did. I think they just, touched them and it made like any cool object they wanted. But this is kind of like the control panel for it. It has a whole bunch of hexagons with some triangles on either side. So I'm going to show you how to make that now. For that, you're going to need actually 2 pieces of paper. The first is just like a regular white piece of paper, like copy paper or printer paper. And the second piece is actually a little bit of cardstock. It's a little bit thicker, and I'm actually going to be using that for painting. The reason why we use cardstock is because when you paint regular paper, it really soaks in all the water and it kind of gets warped and kind of flimsy. When you use the cardstock, if you paint it just a little bit, it's able to soak in that water and it doesn't actually warp or anything. So that's why we're going to use a little bit of cardstock. You can try to use 2 pieces of white paper instead, but I would just be really careful when you're trying to paint because it's just going to soak in all the water and it might warp and and get all kinds of crazy. So we're going to be working on those 2 pieces now. So from the piece of white paper and from the piece of cardstock, you're going to cut 2 exact rectangles. You want them to be exactly the same, and you want them to be pretty much even on all 4 sides. Now, the measurements for this are actually the face plate of the LED here. So what you're going to do is simply measure how large your LED face plate is here, how wide it is, and how long it is, and that's how long your 2 pieces are going to be. You can make them a little bit smaller because you'll notice that there's a lot of extra room on the side from where the light shines through. So you can make them a little bit smaller, but you don't want them to be so small, of course, that they cut into the hexagons here. So once you get 1 piece of cardstock, 1 piece of white paper, we're going to take a pencil and do a little bit trimming and cut out those 4 hexagons plus the 2 triangles, one on the top and one on the bottom. So to give you guys an idea of what this looks like, I actually drew a much bigger image of it here, and this is exactly what these 4 hexagons and the 2 triangles, one on the top and one on the bottom, look like. These are the official images that are used, like the little decals that are used in the movie, like the movie props. So if you guys want to make like a super accurate Tron baton, like the one from the movie, you can use these exact symbols on your 4 hexagons here. This is the top part here, and of course this is the top of the baton. And of course you can pause this on the video here and actually use these symbols if you want to. The trick is when you're actually cutting out your thing here, is when you're starting off this, you want to trace this onto your cardstock. Make sure it is on your cardstock and not your piece of white paper. So what I'm going to do is, you pretty much want to make this as even as possible. You're going to trace out your 2 triangles, one on the top, one on the bottom first, and you want to make them pretty much in the center. Then what you're going to do is simply, I usually draw like the top and the bottom of the hexagon first and then worry about the 2 sides. The hardest part is drawing these perfectly and then eventually cutting them out. So that's why I decided to do it in pencil. You can always, redo it a bunch of different times. If you do it in pen, it's going to be a little bit of trouble. So make sure you do it in pencil and simply just keep tracing those 4 hexagons pretty much even across that piece of cardstock paper. So that's pretty much a rough idea of what you want. Of course, you can make it as perfect or as sloppy as you really want to. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a hobby knife and make sure you have, like a surface that you can work on. And I'm simply going to cut out these pieces here. This is actually easier than drawing them because all you have to do is just, come over these lines here that you've already made and simply cut them out as carefully as possible. You want these lines to be almost perfect, so just go over it, nice and carefully. And once you get a certain piece, you should be able to just kind of just pop it right out if you cut it appropriately here. And since it's cardstock paper, it's a little bit tougher, and it'll behave a little bit better when you're trying to cut all these pieces out. So cut out all those different hexagons plus the 2 triangles right now. Once we have all the shapes cut out, don't worry about any of the little pencil marks because now it's time to paint it. Now once again, we're going to take our black paint, and this is why we use the cardstock, because it will allow it to be painted a little bit better than white paper. And definitely want to do this nice and carefully. Don't just glob the paint on there. You want to make it, just nice even strokes and apply just a very thin layer of paint. And of course, if you do this carefully enough, you can apply as many coats as you want to. It'll probably take at least 1 or 2 coats simply because the lights are so bright that they'll actually shine through the piece of paper plus the black paint on top of it if you have just 1 coat. And you'll see that if you try to hold it up over the light. So you're definitely going to take probably 1 or 2 coats and make sure that it's totally covered all the way around, and it looks just like this piece right here on top. Then once we have a couple of coats of paint on this piece here, what we're going to do is take a small glue stick, and I'm going to cover this piece with glue. This is the regular paper over here, by the way. So just like that, just a little bit on there will work fine. And we're going to take this piece and simply apply it directly on top of this piece here. And if you cut these out to be exactly identical, you want to just line them up perfectly and stick it down just like that. Once we have that glued on and it's totally, we're not going to come apart or anything, we want to make sure that's definitely not going to come apart. You're going to take this and you're very carefully going to glue this using just a little bit of glue stick, or you can also use a little bit of super glue on the sides, and you're going to stick it right there. At this point, once it's glued on, you can take a pen or like a felt tip marker and you can create all those signs on the hexagons that you see here. So you can just draw those right onto it. What this does is basically with the paper underneath it actually diffuses the light, so that all you see, when I can turn it on here, are those 4 hexagons you can see there. And there is a lot of light coming around the side only because I haven't painted that yet, but that's exactly what it'll look like, this one over here, once we paint the sides and put those small little symbols on the 4 hexagons there. So at this point in the tutorial, we kind of come to a bit of a crossroads. If you don't have, like a separate piece, if you weren't able to find a set that it actually came with a smaller flashlight, you can pretty much just stop here. And since the one end cap has the gray on the top, I would probably put a little bit of gray on the top here. Not quite as much as this because it'll bleed right into the center here. But that's a cool little small Tron baton there as well. That'll work out perfectly for, if you're trying to make a cool prop. If you do happen to have, that second piece, all you have to do is if it's exactly the same size as this piece here, it's exactly the same dimensions and everything, all you have to do is take a little bit of super glue, or you can use an industrial strength epoxy or hot glue, put a little ring of it around this piece here that kind of went around that octagon there, and then all you have to do is simply attach it to the top here and let it set for a little while. Once you have that attached, obviously that lengthens the Tron baton considerably. You can paint this entire piece black, just slather the black paint all over that, right over the LED strip, just cover that right up. You can see that's what I did on this piece here.
and then you can just start painting the end cap the same color as the gray as we did on the other side. And then you'll pretty much have your Tron baton.
Alright, so that's pretty much going to wrap up this video on how to make a Tron baton from Disney's Tron Legacy. It really isn't a hard prop to make. I think it's just, the most frustrating part about it is painting it over and over and over again. There are a lot of parts of this prop that take a lot of coats of paint, and that can kind of seem a bit daunting at first. But just keep working with it, and it really is an easy prop to make. The reason why I made this prop is because I'm actually working on a Tron Legacy costume. It's about a year away, so I wanted to work on the accessories for it first, and that's why I decided to make this. I know you guys are probably dying to see what it looks like in the dark, so I'll turn off the light, and you guys will see what the Tron baton works as a flashlight. Alright, so let me turn it on here. This is what it looks like, obviously, in pitch blackness. My camera probably can't focus on those 4 hexagons, but you can definitely tell it's extremely bright, even with that piece of paper and the cardstock, kind of diffusing the light. And you can definitely still use it as a flashlight, which is really cool. Let me turn on one of the lights here so you guys can kind of see how bright it is just in normal light settings. So it's definitely a cool prop. Like I said, have fun making it, and I'll catch you guys next time on the channel. Thanks for watching this video on how to make a Tron Legacy Tron baton.